This is Smithy.tv.
Hi, I'm Katie Ullman reporting for Katie Chats here at Smithy TV in downtown Toronto with Don Berns, who is a host, godfather of the rave scene, actor, voice actor. What inspired you to get into this business?
Well, it all goes back to when I was a child. I was a radio fan when I was growing up in Connecticut. And long story long, I found myself one day, about 2 weeks before I went off to university, I found myself driving near where my hometown station was. And I thought to myself, I wonder what a radio station looks like. I was so close. I drove over, I walked in the lobby. It just so happened that the studio had a window that faced on the lobby. So I'm standing there in the lobby and I'm watching the DJ on the air. This guy comes up to me and he says, "Do you have an appointment?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, you'll have to leave." 2 weeks later, I was at Brown, which is where I went to school, Brown University. Yes, I am from the States, by the way. And it was freshman activity day. It was the very first day of freshman week. And all the campus activities were trying to recruit freshmen to get involved. One of them was the campus radio station, which happened to be the next floor up in the student union building where I was. And I said to myself, well, they're not going to throw me out of the campus station. I'm still interested in what a radio station looks like. So I walked up, I stood there, I watched the guy on the air, and subconsciously my plans to be the next Perry Mason. For those of you who are old enough to remember who Perry Mason is, if not, Google him. My plans to be the next Perry Mason went right out the window, subconsciously. And by the spring of my sophomore year, I was not only on the campus station, running the campus station, but I'd also got my first professional job. And by a series of accidents, I got a job on my hometown station that summer as well. So the summer of 1967, I worked on air professionally in Hartford at WDRC. I didn't want to lose my job in Rhode Island because I needed that job when I came back to school. I needed the money, plus I wanted to continue on, possibly to go into it as a career. So I continued with that job and running the campus station. I recorded a 1-hour show for the campus station that summer as well. So I was on the air in Hartford Monday through Saturday from noon to 5, and then, or Monday through Friday from noon to 5, and then Saturday and Sunday night in Providence, which is 90 miles away, plus the campus show. I figured, but by the end of that summer, if I hadn't gone crazy, I'd found a career. And that's how I got into radio.
And what were some of the biggest challenges initially when you started doing this, or were you just a natural at it right from the beginning?
Some people will say I was a natural at it, but I've heard tapes of me from back then, and God, I was awful, just awful. The biggest challenge was overcoming my ego. And, you know, of course, I'm a sophomore at university. I'm working at 2 different radio stations, one of which is my hometown station, which was, to me, the biggest thing in the world at the time, even though that was Hartford. And I thought I was the bee's knees. I'd say a certain word that begins with SH, but this is TV. I thought I was the bee's knees. And it took the guy who actually railroaded me into my first job in professional radio when he was a senior and I was a sophomore. It took his comment about something that I thought was very clever on the radio, to me, his comment to me about that being that I was an idiot, to kind of settle me down a little bit, because I really respected him. Still do, although he's been out of the business for years. But it took that, getting over that ego was the first thing. And then realizing, then the next wasn't really a challenge, it was just realizing that I had to keep my ears and my eyes open and watch everything and everybody to become successful in my chosen career, and to learn. And the day I stopped learning is the day that, and having fun, was the day that I got out of the business.
So you think that it's very important to stay current and excited while you have a job like this?
Well, back then, especially when you're starting, you need to learn all aspects of radio. You need to learn what makes a good commercial, what makes a commercial sound good. Not only the sound of the commercial, but your voice. What can you do with your voice? I didn't learn decent mic technique till I'd been in the business for about 4 or 5 years. And somebody said, you know, you need to get really close to the microphone and not be afraid of it. Because then you can do more things with your voice. You need to keep your earphones cranked up loud so you can really hear yourself. I go to record commercials now, and I'm shocked at how often the earphones are so low that you couldn't possibly hear anything. If you don't hear what your voice sounds like, you can't really perform to the best of your ability. Now, one of the other things I learned, that one of the most valuable lessons I ever learned, was when I was in Dallas. I was working in Dallas in 1976, 75. And I was hired to do a commercial for Chuck Bloor, who is an internationally renowned producer. He had been in radio, and then he opened his own production company in LA. And I went into one of the big jingle studios. Dallas was the home of Pam's and something else, TM, I think. Anyway, they made jingles for radio stations. And I'm all alone in this. This is the day of massive studios. And you know, nowadays with the equipment, you don't need that. But back then, massive. I'm all alone in the middle of this massive studio. There's a mic stand with a script on it. Chuck Bloor is like 3 miles away in a control booth over there, and he hits the intercom and he says, "All right, read the commercial." So I read the commercial. He says, "All right, now turn it over and tell me what it said again." I go, "What?" He said, "I want you talking to me like you are now. I don't want you being an announcer reading off that paper." That was probably the most valuable lesson I ever learned in voiceovers. And after that, it became a little bit more easy to get them. After that, it became when I auditioned for theater, and I started doing theater in Buffalo, by the way, community theater. And often I'd hear, "Nah, gee, you sound too much like you do on the radio. I don't want people thinking that when they're hearing you on stage." But after the lesson I learned in Dallas, it was so much easier to audition for shows and then to be in shows and create a character who didn't sound like me on the air. And you have to remember, back then in Buffalo, and especially in Buffalo at the station I was at, which was a powerhouse station, I was relatively popular. People knew who I was. It wasn't until I got to Toronto in 1985 that the passion for radio became so evident again that people would recognize me because of my voice a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shifting gears a little bit,
okay.
You have also been called the grandfather of the rave scene. How did you get into that, and what really makes the rave experience so dear to your heart?
Okay. First of all, the Godfather is what they called me, not the grandfather.
Oh, what did I say grandfather? I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's subconscious. I understand. But I would say that is more of an appropriate moniker than the Godfather. Interestingly enough, this came up recently in a thread about something that I was doing. I think it was a rare Dr. Trance appearance on Boxing Day this year. And somebody said, "Well, he's not really the Godfather of the scene. He just calls himself that." Well, no, other people have called me that, and I've found it endearing. So I actually had that put on what passes for my website. I think grandfather is more appropriate, but to go back, I was working at CFNY, which was, it's now known as The Edge, but it doesn't seem to have one. Oh yeah, I was working at CFNY. One of the guys I was working with is Chris Shepard. Chris is very plugged into everything that's going on in the underground in Toronto with dance. He started out as an alternative DJ for the CFNY Video Roadshow, and he became very successful with that. And then he got plugged into the Chicago acid house scene and the rave scene out of Manchester, England. And he started playing this stuff on his shows, all different, whatever, you know, he was really, I mean, this guy was really edgy on the air. He may have a reputation now for being something else, But I'll tell you something, back then, if he said something was happening at street level, you listen to him. And one day he came to me and he said, look, I want you to come with me to this place on Richmond Street. I thought he had something to do with the actual space. He didn't. He actually was the co-owner of the laser beam that they were using in there. But that's, anyway. He said, I want you to come down and experience what's going on there. So I said, sure. At the time, I was hanging out at one of the few clubs I ever hung out at. It's Catch-22, which was an underground industrial sort of club on Adelaide Street. So Saturday night, I'd go there and I'd hang out there and listen to Craig Bizak playing industrial and some pretty hard techno beats. And then I would go over to 23 Hop, which was 318 Richmond. And a group of these guys from Scotland were throwing what eventually, well, I guess what could be called Toronto's first raves. But they weren't warehouse raves. It was just this spot, this gathering spot that was licensed. They had a little bar that they could close down if the cops showed up after hours, the whole deal, you know. It was in an elevator, so it was easy. This building is gone now, so I can say all this stuff. Actually, it became the Joker years later. And now I think it's Much Music or Chum or something. Maybe not. They're all the buildings look alike. Anyway, is that, can you say that, all the buildings look alike? I don't know, I'm not PC. So I went down to this place and I walked in and I was just flabbergasted. The music was extraordinary. Now, I mean, disco was okay, but I was never a big fan. But I was a fan of what we were playing on CFNY that was Eurobeats and industrial, and you combine that with a little bit of house music, which is disco, and you came up with this whole new music called techno. And just songs that were they just blew me away. And in this atmosphere, a very minimalistic atmosphere, very dark. There was, as I mentioned, the laser was happening. The people were fantastic, although to this day, for some reason, the wives and the girlfriends of these Scottish guys took a liking to me, and they would talk to me all night. But with the music blaring so loudly, and their Scottish accents, I could never understand a word they said. Oh yeah, it's good to see you too. One of those guys is Mark Oliver, by the way, who's still very strong and popular in Toronto. So this was my introduction to the music and the scene, the people who were bright. They were fun-loving. They were all there to really get off on the music. They didn't care what you wore. They didn't care what your sexuality is. They didn't, you know, there was a whole thing of communal. There was a communal feeling going on there. It was really nice, but it wasn't until I experienced my first actual warehouse rave that whole thing kicked into high gear. So we flash forward. This is the fall of 1981. Late fall into New Year's Eve, there was a guy named Alex of London who was was the first to actually throw the warehouse parties in Toronto. The warehouse techno parties, not the house parties.
So how many people could you expect at a warehouse?
Well, at this point, you know, Catch-22, 23 Hop was a few hundred people, maybe up to 300-400 people. Warehouse parties in Toronto, at the beginning, you were lucky if you get 500 to 1,000 people. New Year's Eve, not my kind of thing. It just was flat for me. It was very cold in the building. Alex kept trying to get me to drink, and I don't drink. And didn't have, but I still, you know, I've been hearing about these warehouse parties. Now, my parents used to have a winter, they used to spend the winter in Palm Desert in California. And I used to go out every February to visit them and then maybe go to LA and hang out for a few days. So on my annual trip out there in February of 1992, I made a point to go to LA and to call a friend of mine at Warner Brothers in the dance music department and find out, are there any raves in LA? Because I really want to experience a warehouse rave. He says, are there any raves? There's 5 that night in LA. So he hooks me up with a guest list for one. And after, this story is so much fun, I need to tell it. I know I'm babbling on, but this is so much fun. I get a location to go to. It's in West Hollywood. So I hook up with a buddy of mine, actually an old radio friend from Buffalo who's living in LA. We go to this address in West Hollywood, and it's a costume shop, and I don't hear any music happening anywhere, but there's a couple of big burly security guards at the door, and I'm thinking, okay, whatever. You go into this place, and all they have is just some people there, and you pay your money for your ticket, or in my case, you give your name, and they give you a piece of paper. On the piece of paper is an invitation to a video shoot, some sort of video shoot, video wrap party for a shoot or something. Call this number. This is the days before cell phones, but there just happened to be a payphone right outside the shop. Call the number, get a recorded message. If you have an invitation, please bring it to this address in downtown LA, about 15 miles away. Hop in the car, go to that location. There's a limo. A guy sitting in the limo rolls the window down. Let me see your wristband, which I got when I was on the... Show him the wristband. He gives me directions to the party another mile away from there. I'm in the warehouse district somewhere in downtown Los Angeles.
This is commitment.
Exactly. And I'm saying this party better be good after all this, right? We walk into this party, and like so many other people who went to raves in the early days, especially in the early days, it changed my life. I have never seen such energy, such excitement, such joy of living, of dancing, everything. And it was amazing. This room looked like it might have been a theater at one point. There was a balcony around the main floor. There was a stage. There were steps that looked like concrete steps that looked like there might have been seats on them at one point. People with laser pens everywhere shooting. I'd never seen a laser pen by that point either. Shooting them everywhere. The music was amazing. The only thing, there was a bar downstairs, and it was only serving water and nitrous oxide and balloons. And there was a cat in a hat. There was a hat rack with all these different kinds of cat in a hat hats that they were selling. That was the only thing on the main floor. Upstairs was about the same thing. The ACT UP, the AIDS awareness organization, had a booth. They were giving out condoms and information and so forth and so on. And there was a small room, and in the middle of the room was just a strobe light going like that, and people dancing to house music around that light. A bunch of chairs, and a bunch of like 3 or 4 outdoor type deck chairs. People sitting on them with these crazy looking glasses that had all these flashing lights all around them. And I started talking to the guy, and he said, well, you know, you pay $5 or $10 and you can sit and wear these for 10 minutes. They're called mind glasses, mind machine glasses or something. Okay, here's my $5. You put them on, and they're strobing these colors at you. So even with your eyes closed, you end up seeing these colors that you never knew existed before. It was right after that they brought them to Toronto. They started using them in Toronto. But the whole idea of going from this place to that place to the other place is something that I brought back from LA in my head. That I said, oh, this is amazing. Like the next week, I was at the Factory on Mercer Street, which was another club that played techno music. This one on Saturday nights that played techno. And DJ Ian, who was the DJ there on Friday nights, walked up to me and he said, how would you like to DJ at a rave? We're forming a new company. I found out later he asked me, he asked Shep, he asked James St. Bass from CIUT, and Denise Benson from CKLN, because he wanted the radio presence, because this was a way to promote. James and Ian and his partner James were great at that. I said, you know, I've got all these great ideas. I just got back from LA. I'd love to play, even though I don't know what I'm doing, but I'd like to promote as well. So I became part of the Nitrous organization, and we did five raves, I think. We brought, with Chris Shepard, we brought 2 Unlimited to Toronto, and it's just the whole vibe going on there was just so exciting. 1,500 people would be a very successful rave. Okay. Between Nitrous and Chemistry at the beginning, because Chemistry kicked in, we were each doing about 1,500 people per rave. One of our Nitrous partners split off and formed Better Days, Pleasure Force, sorry, and that kicked it into the next gear. By the time we were done, Nitrous was done, 2,000 to 2,500 was good. By the time the scene peaked in the late 90s, 15 to 20,000 was good. That's how big it got. And the parties moved from warehouses and abandoned office buildings to the Better Living Center at the X, to the International Center on Airport Road. It got that big, but as they got bigger, the tone of them changed. The kind of people changed. I was under the impression when it began that everybody's got to know about this because it's extraordinary. You walk in, you'll feel it. I've said this before and I'll say it now, I was wrong. I mean, there's a lot of people who found out about raves because of my radio show on Energy 108. That's another, I'll tell you really quickly how that happened, but, and they became part of the scene and a good part of the scene. But there were a lot of people who found out about these parties for all the wrong reasons, and they showed up for all the wrong reasons. You know, the bigger something gets, the more of an element that you don't necessarily want to be part of it. And this is true of any scene. The Energy 108 thing, after I got fired from CFNY, 7 of us got fired in the same day. They were changing directions. This was the beginning of the turn from the spirit of radio to the edge. One of the guys who got fired was Scott Turner, who took his sensibilities for alternative music and turned them to dance music at Energy 108. Making it a very unique and great dance music radio station. When I started in the rave scene, and I got my name Dr. Trance, which was about 3 nitrous raves in, somebody came up to me and said, well, yeah, start calling you Dr. Trance. I said, okay. I asked Scott if he wanted a Dr. Trance show on the radio, and he thought it was a great idea. He was going to the raves, he knew the music. Thought it was a great idea. That took the level of Dr. Trance from here to there. Because people were, we had a lot of people listening, a lot of people responding. Consequently, the music was getting out there. But I would go down the list of every rave every weekend, so people knew what was going on. Because one of the reasons I did that, because the radio station in LA, Mars FM, was doing that when I was out there for that. And I thought, geez, they're talking about this on the radio. This is really cool. Then they'd have people calling in after the rave. They put them live on the air. Well, how was this one? How was this one? Was it good? What was, it was just a real exciting time.
And did you make people go to various spots in order to get to the rave?
Yes. Back then, there were meeting points. They started out being various and sundry place parking lots and what have you. They ended up being a lot more accessible places, Union Station, Nathan Phillips Square, places like that. Then, unfortunately, there were times that people would find out about this and they go down and they start robbing the people waiting for the buses and so forth. And this is just like, people who would probably pick your pocket in any kind of public situation anyway. So at one point, I guess the meeting point sort of dwindled off near the end because the locations, once the city banned raves in locations that were not licensed for public gatherings, pretty much you had to have them in known spaces. So you started promoting the spaces. But that was late 90s. This was after a long run in warehouses. And by the way, no matter what you may have heard, these places were safe. We made sure of it.
And what are your goals for the future? Are you can we see you in more theater?
Yeah, well, I actually retired as Dr. Trance 10 years ago. I do play occasionally. I play Pride every year at the, well, it changes now thanks to Pride. They don't seem to know where they want to do with us, but we had when I was at onegroove.com, which was an all progressive electronic dance music station, we started our own stage at Pride, and 3 of us still play every year, myself, Jello, and DeCozy. They moved us to Saturday last year. This year, don't know what's going to happen yet, so stay tuned. But we do play there every year, and occasionally promoters who I know will ask me to play a party, and I'll say yes, because I love to play. I'm not out there promoting myself and getting new music all the time, and it's just not my thing anymore.
And are you focusing more on acting now as well?
Yeah, I started back into acting. I had done a lot of stage in the States. And I pretty well gave that up here. First with CFNY. When I became program director, I just didn't have the time. And then with the rave scene, I was working almost every Friday and Saturday night, so that's when all the shows are. So I didn't do anything on stage for like 22 years. And then along came a buddy of mine and said, why don't you want to take some improv classes? And I thought, I, of course, was a fan of Whose Line Is It Anyway? And I thought, yeah, I'd love to do that. I started doing that and started meeting people at the Bad Dog Theater where I was taking classes. And then I was at the Leash Free Park one day, and I met up with this really nice woman, and she's an actress. And she said, we were talking, and she said, why don't you audition for this play that I'm doing in Brampton? And I did. First time on stage in like 22 years. And I was like, oh, I got to do this some more. Found out from someone at the Bad Dog Theater where there's a lot of musical theaters, because that's what I really love. And I started doing shows with the groups who use the Meadowvale Theater in Mississauga, which is where I'm doing Follies, starting on January 25th, sorry. And then she suggested that I talk to her agent. I got an agent. I started doing some on-camera work as well. I've done a bunch of TV shows and commercials, a bunch of student films and some indie films and so forth, and whatever I can get. My agent's out there looking for me. I do that, and the voiceover work just keeps me busy. I'm currently narrating a show called Air Aces on the History Channel, and that's a 6-episode arc. So we'll see. Whatever happens, I'm there. If it's entertainment, I'm there.
And where's the best place to find out more information on you and all the exciting things that you're doing online?
Well, the best place is probably on Facebook. I'm there on Facebook, and it's Berns. I think I'm probably the only Don Berns with an E. On Facebook. I do have a site, but I very rarely use it because I've just never gotten around to it. So whenever I'm doing anything, I post it on Facebook. Okay.
Thank you so much, Don. Congratulations on all of your accomplishments, and I can't wait to see more in the future.
Well, I can't either, because the future is so exciting. Thanks, Katie. I appreciate it.
I'm Katie Ullman reporting for Katie Chats here at Smithy TV in downtown Toronto.